Hello, Bible Biker Church. How was that for an imitation? Good job.
All right.
Pastor Fred is not well. He's under the weather. And so I'm Grace Hammer. I'm good. Thank you, Pops. I'm Grace Hammer, and I'm the pastor of the New Beginning Evangelical Presbyterian Church down in Spring City. So we're going to be looking at Ruth chapter 2. Ruth chapter 2. Now then, we're going to start off by looking at Romans 8, verse 28. Oh, I think you've got that.
Just one second here. Yeah. I got that.
All right. Would you read that for us?
On the 8 part? Okay.
Verse 28.
Verse 28. I don't know what verse 28 is.
Could you?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose.
All right. So is there a coincidence with God? That things just kind of happen?
No.
No. He has been planning and all of this sort of stuff a long time ago. So as we read this, I want you to keep in mind that he works all things good for those that love him, that are called to his purpose. All right. I don't have it up on the TV, so you just have to listen and follow along in your own Bibles. I'm reading from the NIV. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now, if you've ever been down in Alabama, there's a town called Boaz in Alabama. Been there many, many a time. I've got relatives down that way. But we talked about Elimelech last week. I don't know if you can hear the train in the background. But anyway, and it says, now let's talk about, since it's man standing from the Boaz, and verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up leftover grain behind anyone whose eyes I find favor. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 and 6.
Don't you read it?
Please.
If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel.
All right. So, for instance, now, Bo, you've got a brother.
Mm-hmm.
Is he married?
Mm-hmm.
All right. If something happened to him and he died and they did not have children, you would have to marry her, his wife, and your first son that you had would receive any inheritance and would be considered the son of your brother.
Okay.
Is that as clear as mud? All right, very good. It's called a kinsman redeemer. Somebody who's close in kin, a kinsman redeemer. And the Hebrew word for that is goel. G-O-E-L, goel. Now then, Isaiah chapter 49. Pops, did you have that?
Chapter 49.
Chapter 49.
I put it in the wrong place.
Okay,
Vicky's probably done that.
I've got it.
you're good. Verses 6 and 7.
I put it in Jeremiah.
He says, it is too light a thing that you should be my servant. to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, his Holy One, to one deeply despised, abhorred by the nation, the servant of rulers. Kings shall see and arise, princes, and they shall prostrate themselves because of the Lord who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, who has chosen you.
All right. God is our kinsman redeemer. He is our redeemer, our Goel. Okay? And so now we're going to look one other place before we start on Ruth. I know I'm getting a whole lot of background here before we start on Ruth. Proverbs 31, starting at verse 10 through 31.
What was it?
Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31. Rose, you got that?
I'm getting there.
You get there.
Here's 31, what?
Work of the
I
day.
didn't want to be a teacher's pet.
Proverbs 31, what?
Starting at verse 10 through 31.
I'm not gonna read it either, but an excellent wife who can find, she is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of grain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flocks and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buries it with the fruit of
And
her,
buys it.
and buys it, sorry,
Okay.
with the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands on the staff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, and for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed covering for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and teaching of her kindred is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who shares the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her work praises her in the gates.
All right. So at the city gates is where it was a large, structure. Two sides and a top and all this. It was a large structure that would allow people to come through, and they could close it up at night. But the elders of the community would sit at the city gates and watch who came and went, and if there was any dispute with anyone, they would handle the dispute. they would, if there was a question about what was right or wrong, you would go to the elders at the city gate. So for a woman of valor to have her husband be revered by the men of the city gate was really something. Was really something that he would be held in high regard, and that she would be held in high regard as well, and that she could do trading. She does not eat the bread of idleness, meaning she doesn't sit around and eat a bag of Cheetos and watch soap operas. You know, she.
A little nibble of that. I've been too busy this week.
Yeah, I hear you. So as you listen to that, let's look at Ruth and what she does. Proverbs 31 is thought to have been written about Ruth. So I'm going to read and we'll just kind of break it down. I'd already started there at verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Now then, in Deuteronomy and all of that, it was stated in the Mosaic law, in the law of Moses, that you would not, when you went and you picked the tomatoes from your vines, you didn't pick every tomato. You left a few. So if somebody, a stranger or an orphan or a widow, they could come along and they could pick a tomato to have to eat. Same thing with your green beans, your corn, and all of that. You didn't worry about getting every last one. You left some for those who were in need. So it means that you planted so that you had plenty and a little extra. So that you were providing for your family first, but you would have extra that you could have in the field for others to gather. Now, in our time, we lock our doors at harvest time because we know somebody's going to stick a basket of squash or a basket of tomatoes, and we've already got a full basket of tomatoes sitting at home, you know, that we can't use. But back then, that's, you know, that's just what you did. And so that was already set up. So she is doing this. You got to understand, Naomi has taught Ruth about God and about God's laws. She would have done that. Verse 3, where it says, Naomi said to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Look at Matthew chapter 1, and let's see who's Boaz. Matthew chapter 1. Verses 1 through 5.
That same Rahab from Jericho.
Hang on. Don't get ahead of me here. Back up, girl. All right. Pops, would you read that? 1 through 5.
The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. And Judas begat Phares, and Zerah of Tamar, and Phares begat Esrom, and Esrom begat Aram. And Aram, however you say it, begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Naasson, and Naasson begat Salmon. And Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, begat Jesse.
All right. You remember who Rahab was? Vicky, I know you know.
Yeah.
Do you remember who Rahab was? She's Boaz's mother.
And she the one hid the,
Hid the spies.
hid the eyes, yeah.
She hid the spies, and then her and her family was rescued. What did she do for a living?
She was a prostitute.
She was a prostitute.
What's begat mean?
Was father,
Oh,
was the father of, yeah. If you have any children, you begat children.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Your father begat you.
Linda begat Bo.
Okay.
Yeah, Linda begat
I didn't know
yeah.
what that means.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they use words that sometimes we don't use anymore.
He's got King James. Mine says the father of.
That's what mine says.
Yeah, but that's what begat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right.
And what Ruth was doing was gleaning.
She was gleaning the field. She was going through behind the harvesters that were picking everything, gathering up the wheat and all that sort of stuff. But she was going behind them and picking up what was left over.
Yeah.
Because you got that rule back in Deuteronomy that says you leave some behind. You don't worry about picking every last little thing off, every little shaft of wheat and all that sort of stuff. You gather what you need, and then for your family and all that, and for what you're going to sell, but you leave some for the stranger, for the orphan, for the widow, so they'll have something to eat.
Travelers.
Yeah, travelers, so they'll be provided for. But Boaz's mama, every time she is mentioned in the Bible, it is Rahab the prostitute. Pretty much every time she's mentioned in the Bible, it says something about her being a prostitute or harlot. So did Boaz know what his mama did for a living
I would say so.
before
Well,
she
maybe.
met Solomon? I can't call him Salmon. Solomon.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing when I say probably.
Yeah. You would. Community talks.
Yeah.
Kids hear what their parents say, and then they tell it on the playground.
Yep.
They tell it on. I mean, how many things do you know about your friends' parents that you learned at school that,
My little girl, well, y'all know Casey, she was just little, and she put in a prayer request because Mom and Daddy got in a fight because Daddy was picking his nose and wiping it on the towels in front of the whole church.
Yeah. Oh. And it's like I had a little set of twins at a preschool that it was an after-school program at a church I was working at. And the little girl was not feeling well, and her parents had separated. And was asking her, whose week is it to pick you up, Mommy's or Daddy's? I don't know, because Mommy's boyfriend moved out, and Daddy's comes over, and he sleeps in Mommy's bed now and then, so I don't know whose week it is. So yes, okay.
I'm moving right along.
Yeah. So kids talk. I mean, everybody knew what she was. Everybody knew what she was and what she had done for them. I mean, she was honored and revered for having, kept the spies. But, so, Boaz's mama was not, this lily white Valley of the Dolls type,
Yeah.
type person, okay? She'd been around. She'd had a rough life. So when we watch what Boaz does, keep that in mind. All right, so going on. Verse 4. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters.' She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." So what did we say in Proverbs 31? One of the things of a woman of valor, she gets up early and goes to work to provide for her family. Her family now is Naomi, her mother-in-law. She has set aside her own family back in Moab and has taken Naomi as her family. Verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I've told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this she bowed down with her face to the ground, and she asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me? I'm a foreigner." Now then, go back to the 1970s. What's a foreigner? What is foreigner?
They say Colin's eyes.
Yes, they say, yeah, it's a rock group.
Yeah.
So she's a foreigner.
Yeah.
A foreigner. Yeah, foreigners, a rock group. People that aren't from around here are foreigners.
Yeah.
Hotel California.
Those are eagles, not foreigners.
Yeah, that was the Eagles.
Well, that's foreigners too.
Yeah. Alrighty. Boaz replied, verse 11. "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Now, what did Bo read there in Romans about, we talked about coincidence.
That it's a plan.
It's a plan.
Yeah.
What was absolutely horrible to her, her husband died, her father-in-law died, her brother-in-law died, and she is traveling with her mother-in-law to a foreign land, to a place she's never been before.
And not only did she leave her family, her gods. They worshipped different gods. They
Yeah.
didn't worship the Lord God.
That's exactly right. But Naomi had taught her. I mean, that is not in the scriptures, but she did not, there's no way she came to this point of faith in Naomi without Naomi being kind to her and teaching her. That's my own supposition. That's my own idea. But yes, nothing happens without God. God works out everything for good for those that love Him. So we know that that Ruth must have loved God, because it turns out for good for those that love Him and that are according to His purpose. Verse 13. "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." She's saying, I'm not as good as one of your servants. I mean, your servants are from around here. I'm not. And I'm but you're being so very nice to me. And that's chesed. C-H-E-S-E-D. Chesed. Chesed is loving kindness. It's the Hebrew word for loving kindness. It can also mean just, kindness, favor, grace, but chesed. And it is showing favor, not just being nice to somebody, but being nice to somebody that does not deserve it. Or being, okay, so somebody gives, anybody here watch The Big Bang Theory? Okay. I can't think of the girl's name. Penny. Penny gives Sheldon a napkin, a paper napkin for Christmas. And Leonard Nimoy had signed it. And she thought, well, Sheldon would like that. Leonard Nimoy had come into the restaurant, and so he had signed this napkin for her. And then she says, I'm sorry, it's dirty. He had already wiped his mouth with it. Sheldon was beside himself. He was beside himself. He said, I've got Leonard Nimoy's DNA. That was just like, he goes and runs into another room and comes out with basket after basket after basket of, these gift baskets filled with stuff. He brings out about 10 of them because he had bought gift baskets, so if somebody gave him something, depending on what they gave, he would give them one little gift basket in return. Penny gets all the gift baskets. That was chesed. That was chesed. It was more than, she didn't go out of her way. Leonard Nimoy happened to come into the restaurant. He wiped his face on a napkin, wiped his mouth, and she had him sign it. That was all. It was nothing. It was more than what she deserved getting all of these gift baskets. Chesed is what God gives us. He gives us so much more than we deserve. All the good things that we have in our life. Air to breathe. Trees to look at that change colors. Fred having good renters. Not just being able to rent out the house, but good renters in both of the houses. And just all of the things that we have, a place to lay our head at night. For those of us that have pets, it's, a pet to roughhouse with and rub behind the ears and all of that and just have them lay their head on your lap. All of that is chesed from God to us. All right. Verse 14. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar. When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. Don't fuss at her. Don't fuss at her. So what they've already gathered, he's saying, pull a few of those stalks out and just kind of leave them laying on the ground for her to pick up. When you're out picking apples or something like that, it's like, don't pick all the apples. And if you've got a bushel basket of apples, leave a couple in a little pile for her to gather, to take home. So, verse 17. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Now, she's been there since early in the morning until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah, about almost a bushel. not quite a bushel, but about 3/5 of a bushel, something like that. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over from lunch, or leftover after she had eaten enough. So she didn't just, okay, well, I've eaten enough, and toss, the leftovers of the McDonald's bag aside. No, she brought the leftovers back to Naomi, because Naomi's been at the house and not had anything all day. She's counting on Ruth to provide for her for something to eat. And so, you think about, well, I don't want to eat all this sandwich. What? Tear it in half, eat half, take half home to somebody that doesn't have something to eat,
Right.
hasn't had supper.
Wrap it up in a swan foil paper.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do aluminum foil thing where it looks like a swan. Yeah, there you go. Verse 19. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." Naomi's ears perk up at the sound of Boaz, because she knew who Boaz was. I mean, everybody knew who Boaz's mama was. She knew who Boaz was. And it's like, he's related to my husband. Verse 20. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is a close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers, or kinsman redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work with him, because in someone else's fields you might be harmed. You go somewhere else, some of those fellows might take a little sideways glance at you and have some wrong ideas." Verse 23. So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvest were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So she stayed through the entire harvest season, gleaning, going in and gathering up from the barley and the wheat that was in Boaz's field. She didn't go anywhere else. She just went there. And of course, whatever she brought back, they probably set some aside and all of that. But they were also then able to sell what they did not need, sell it at the market to buy other things that they needed. Who here has too many, I'm going to ask the women. I know you men folk aren't like this. Who here has too many blouses, tops, skirts, pants, whatever, in their closet that they couldn't get rid of a few to sell, to buy things that you need?
Don't look at me.
Put it on the internet and buy something that you...
I do.
Yeah, we've got that. And that's what they would have done. That's what they would have done.
That are too big and that fit and too small.
Yeah.
'Cause
Oh,
you
well,
might
I'm going to
lose
get
some
into that
money.
when that's too small. Yeah, right. I've been saying that for 2 years. So that concludes chapter 2. But you see how God provides. Now, remember what Fred had said last week. When they left Bethlehem, when they left that area and went over near the Moabites, they had not talked to God. Elimelech did not talk to God about, there's a famine in the land. Should I take my family and move? There's no record that he talked to him about anything. And he went there and then allowed his 2 sons to marry non-Jewish women. Orpah and Ruth. But Orpah, she was like, oh, I'll stay with you. And Naomi's like, no, you don't have to. Okay, good. It's like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And there's nothing wrong with that. She was going back to her family, to her dad, her mom, and all what she knew. But Ruth was like, no, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stick around. What your God will be my God. Your people are my people. Your ways, my ways. And so, I'm sure Naomi was talking to her about this on the time they were walking back. So, it's even in the hardest times of our lives, you think there's no way out. I'm on foot, and Bo, you know this, and I'm on foot, don't have any transportation, don't know where I'm going to lay my head down next, and all this sort of stuff. God has a plan. You just got to keep moving forward. As somebody once said, it said that God does not close a door when He opens a window or something like that. He says, but that's not going to open until you start walking towards it. Closes one door and another one opens. That other door is not going to open as long as you're standing there staring at the door that closed.
We're partners with God, we have to do our part.
Exactly. All right, we'll turn the recording off and have our private prayers and praises.
That napkin store years ago, and my younger brother was working in a strip mine in Alabama.